Britain and France agree to take more Syrian refugees. And South African students rebel against the language that defined apartheid. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent Makori. This is Africa 54. We begin in Burundi, where gunmen have shot dead an opposition official in the capital, Bujumbura. Witnesses say they heard gunshots in the capital's Senyi district on Monday evening and then found Patrice Gahungu, a spokesman for the opposition UPD Zagimbimana party, dead in his car. A police officer said he was shot near his home, the latest in a spate of killings after the disputed re-election of President Pierre Nkurunziza. Burundi was plunged into a political crisis in late April when Nkurunziza announced he would seek a third term, which opponents and Western powers said violated a peace deal that ended an ethnically charged civil war in 2005. Protests in April and June left dozens dead and prompted tens of thousands of people to flee the country. Nkurunziza was sworn in on August the 20th for another 5-year term. His party won a sweeping victory in a parliamentary vote. Now, for some perspective on the political and security situation in Burundi, Atanas Gahungu, Professor, Chicago State University, joins me live via phone from Illinois. Professor, welcome to Africa 54.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for welcoming me.
Now, as we mentioned, there have been a number of other killings in the last few months. There was one in in May and in August too. What are we to read into this?
It's difficult to have a clear read into this because I think, yes, indeed, there is brutality from the government, but there is also as much brutality from the opposition. I think it's sad that the opposition would also think that the only way to bring back peace to Burundi is through armed violence. It's not whenever we have those killings. Those are killings of Burundians. Those are killings of probably innocent people. Those are killings of the people we need, that Burundi needs to be able to move on. So there is... Yeah, go ahead.
Would you say this are kind of revenge killings where somebody, maybe an individual within a party, decides to target the person on the other side because one of theirs was killed?
I think, to me, those are revenges. I think there is no other way of characterizing that. And I do believe that Burundi is situated in an area that's, for security reasons, that's very difficult to control. You have, all of a sudden, whenever you have, we have a conflict, whether they are political, whether they are social, you have, one time you have people, we cross the border to go to either Tanzania, to Congo, or to Rwanda, and all of a sudden you have similar shift. You have a peace in Burundi, then the Rwandans are going to come to Burundi, then the Congolese are going to come to Burundi. And when things change, you have the reverse. Now we have Burundians going to Rwanda, going to Tanzania, going even as far as Kenya and the Congo. So all of that, in terms of security, that's very difficult to manage.
Now, talking about security, since the elections are over, President Nkurunziza has been sworn in. Would you say that Burundi is getting peaceful, or there's still concerns about security in that country?
I would be lying or too naive to say that it's getting more peaceful. That's further from the truth. At the same time, I think I would hope that there are people who are trying to bring people to the table to try to make sense out of what's going on. Because to me, the real issue to me is the whole question of the Constitution of Burundi or even the Arusha Accord.
Thank you.
To get a reading that's going to assure that when the people go to the polls and vote for a president, that we can count those 60% or more as being legitimate.
Thank you very much,
yes,
Professor Gahungu. Thank you. We'll continue this conversation another time. Atanas Gehungu is a professor at Chicago State University. Over to Europe, appeals judges at the International Criminal Court on Tuesday rejected a request for the temporary release of former Ivory Coast President Laurent Gbagbo on health grounds weeks before the start of his trial on November the 10th. Gbagbo, 70, is accused of plunging his country into civil war rather than relinquishing his grip on power after losing a presidential runoff election in 2010. He has been detained in The Hague since November 2011 after being arrested in April of that year in Ivory Coast. Court documents say he suffered from post-traumatic stress syndrome and an unspecified physical ailment. In Tuesday's ruling, a panel of 3 judges rejected all grounds of appeal lodged by Gbagbo's lawyers against the lower court's decision to extend his custody. Well, now turning to the ongoing refugee crisis in Europe, Britain has announced it will now take in tens of thousands of refugees from Syria. It follows a public outpouring of distress across Europe after pictures were published last week showing the body of a drowned 3-year-old Syrian boy washed up on a Turkish beach. And Ridgewell reports from London.
In recent weeks, the harrowing images of refugees fleeing war have piled pressure on European Union leaders to act. Britain had refused to increase its intake, but speaking in Parliament Monday, Prime Minister David Cameron announced a further 20,000 Syrian refugees would be given asylum over the next 5 years.
We will continue with our approach of taking refugees from the camps and from elsewhere in Turkey, Jordan and Lebanon. This provides refugees with a more direct and safe route to the United Kingdom, rather than risking the hazardous journey to Europe, which has tragically cost so many lives.
Cameron refused to sign up to EU plans for compulsory quotas of refugees who have already arrived in Europe. The policy change is welcome, but the scale of the crisis is immense, says Andrej Mahecic of the United Nations Refugee Agency.
The resettlement is not only a life-saving and a critical intervention for many of these people, it is equally a concrete gesture of solidarity and burden sharing with the neighbouring countries, which are currently hosting more than 4 million Syrian refugees.
France also announced it would increase the number of Syrian asylum places.
La Commission européenne propose ou va proposer.
The European Commission is going to propose that 120,000 refugees are shared over the next 2 years. That will represent for France 24,000 people. We will do it. We will do it because that is the principle on which France works.
President Hollande said it was vital to tackle the conflicts that are causing the crisis. He announced the deployment of aircraft over Syria for reconnaissance and possibly airstrikes targeting the so-called Islamic State. Britain says it killed 3 Islamic State militants with drone strikes in Syria last month. 2 of them were British citizens, including this man, Rayad Khan, whom the government claims was planning terror attacks in Britain. Henry Ridgewell for VOA News, London.
Well, as the refugees continue to pour into Europe with hopes of finding new homes, they face great challenges. Aid agencies trying to help them are feeling the pressure. VOA's Mike Richmond has the story.
The Keleti railway station in Budapest, Hungary, has become a key transit route for refugees trying to get to richer European nations like Germany, Austria, France, and the Netherlands. Most of the refugees fleeing to Europe are from Syria and Iraq, but the fighting in Afghanistan forced this man to leave his country.
I have been en route for 2 months. We came from Afghanistan into Iran and smuggled to Turkey. From Turkey to Greece, then to Macedonia, then to Serbia, and now to Hungary. On the way, we faced a lot of problems.
Like Hungary, Greece is struggling to cope with an influx of refugees. On Monday, hundreds of them crossed from Greece to Macedonia. They stayed in this camp for several hours before boarding trains or buses to Serbia with the aim of reaching Western Europe, especially Germany.
I want to travel to Germany. I found a nice life. I don't like fight every time fight. In my country's fight.
Aid workers from the United Nations Refugee Agency, the International Red Cross, and humanitarian groups are trying to help the refugees at the camp. The situation there is dangerous and chaotic, says Bill Frelick of Human Rights Watch.
We have spent the day today watching people that have been in crowds outside of the facility, women and children that have been dropping, fainting because they didn't have enough water, no shade, just staying in the hot sun.
Frelick says that the people at the camp are afraid and are not being told what is going on, adding they are suffering unnecessarily. Mike Richmond, VOA News, Washington.
High unemployment in many sub-Saharan African countries has young people especially, thinking of new ways to make a living. In Uganda, a young woman is taking a lead in business to help local people put food on their table. Africa 54's Esther Githu-Yuart is in the studio to tell us more. Esther.
That's right, Vincent. Miriam is a young entrepreneur who is keen on promoting domestic and international tourism and says it's an enjoyable venture that boosts the country's economy and benefits its citizenry.
Miriam Chasimire runs the Kagera Safaris Tour and Travel Company. She says her goal is to ensure every tourist dollar spent in Uganda benefits the locals.
It's not just another tour company. It's a tour company that is committed to seeing the tourism dollar come down to the communities so that the communities also are able to benefit.
This young entrepreneur wants to see more Ugandans visiting different regions of the country where they can learn from each other and also appreciate the beauty within their borders.
It just moves money from one area to another. And right now, starting last year, the Uganda Tourism Board has been working on what we call domestic tourism. And every time I have my friends and take them around on a tour, they're always like, is this Uganda? I'm like, yeah, this is your country.
She wonders why Ugandans would spend money to tour faraway parts of the world when there's so much beauty at home as well as neighboring East African countries.
When a Ugandan moves from Kampala and moves, let's say, to Kabale, that's also transfer of money from Kampala to Kabale. But then they get to appreciate their country and they're more patriotic actually after that. They're like, we didn't know we had these beautiful places. We didn't know we had these beautiful islands on Lake Victoria.
And after visiting the U.S., Miriam says she has a new vision for Uganda and sees her native country from a different perspective.
And seeing the impression that people have of Uganda, that's something I want to change. That people would come to Uganda and experience the true and real Uganda as opposed to what they read in the news or what they watch on TV that is sometimes not a representative of what Uganda is.
For those who would like to visit Uganda, she has some suggestions for sites that will take your breath away.
You have to go to Jinja and see source of the Nile. That is a must-see. You have to go to Makshon Falls and look at those, when the Nile is compressed into a 7-meter gorge and see how those, the falls, they are very powerful. You'd want to go on a boat safari and experience the animals coming down to drink and, all that. I would say go to Lake Bunyonyi, very beautiful, down in the corner with near Congo and Rwanda. That's a place you have to visit. And I'd say visit Mbale, look at the hills and hike up the Mount Elgon.
This young entrepreneur is also involved in youth mentorship, helping them see that it is possible to start a business with available resources, no matter how limited.
Indeed, every African country is unique, from the landscape to the peoples and their diverse cultures. And what Africa needs is connectivity from one country to another to ensure domestic and intra-Africa tourism thrives. Vincent?
Thank you very much. Now, I want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa54. Check out our headlines at 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Let me know what you would like us to feature. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince Makori. Coming up, the World Health Organization calls for regulation of traditional medicine on the continent. So stay with us.
This is Greenbeat for a healthier planet.
How to create a better solar cell.
Perovskite.
Say again?
Perovskite. So I think the biggest breakthrough here at Northwestern and at the Answer Center, and I would boldly also claim in solar energy research, is the renaissance of this new material called perovskite.
Dick Coe is the Director of Operations at the Argonne Northwestern Solar Energy Research Center. Coe says the mineral perovskite might help lower cost in solar cell manufacturing.
You can spray paint this like inkjet printing, like how we print newspapers to make solar cells. that are now as efficient as the silicon solar panel.
Ko says implementation of these third-generation solar cells could be just a few years away.
We'll see them in appliances and consumer electronics where these technologies are better at absorbing diffuse light.
The Answer Center is an Energy Frontier Research Center funded by the U.S. Department of Energy. Its focus, says Ko, is to find ways to make solar energy less expensive and more efficient. I'm Rebecca Ward for VOA's Green Beat.
Welcome back. Yesterday, we introduced you to Noah Samara, chairman and CEO of YASM USA Incorporated, who some consider the founding father of satellite radio. In part 2 of the conversation with him, Mr. Samara talks to VOA's Yeheyes Wahib about his company's latest venture, the YASM system, which would offer the world's first satellite-enabled tablet computer to young people around the world.
The YASM system consists of a satellite network, a tablet, a server that sits in a school and creates a Wi-Fi connectivity and provides continuous satellite updates to the tablets and the devices that students are using, and a solar power charger for places where electricity is non-existent, and content.
The YASM system is operational right now in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, and of all places, at a high school, St. Joseph. How did that all come about, and is YASM having the intended effect?
In May of this year, we went to the principal of St. Joseph, which was the high school I went to.
I think that school is familiar to me too. Okay.
Yes, indeed. So we went to him and we suggested a pilot, but we wanted to do the pilot in a very highly measured kind of way. We wanted to measure outcome. We wanted to see whether there was a difference between students who used this tablet and students who didn't. So we crafted the design of the pilot itself in a very careful way. We took the syllabus that St. Joseph follows, which is the Ethiopian syllabus. We took that sort of textbook, two-dimensional content, went to content makers, and we said, following this syllabus, lesson by lesson, we want you to give us the best content that explains that concept from the best content that can be found. So they went on and they took each lesson, amplified each lesson, and reduced it into a video or content that summarized that lesson in several minutes. So the way the program would begin is, at each lesson the teacher would get content that is specialized, that teaches the teacher how to best and most effectively teach that particular lesson to the classroom. Then the teacher teaches based upon the learning experience, teaches for the first 30 minutes or so, or 35 minutes of the class. Then the video is played as a reinforcer to what the students have just learned. And then after that, there is an assessment that occurs, so that they self-test, and that assessment automatically goes to a server.
Well, joining us now is Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Mudu. What do you have for us today, Lino?
Hello, Vincent. Well, the World Health Organization officials have called for the regulation of traditional medicine in Africa to protect the public against potentially harmful practices. Dr. Matshidiso Moeti, the WHO's regional director for Africa, has issued a letter urging governments to strengthen regulatory bodies for traditional health practitioners. She calls upon researchers to work with traditional practitioners to produce a scientific evidence on the safety, effectiveness, and quality of their products. The announcement could have broad implications for the estimated 80% of Africans who rely on traditional practitioners for their primary mode of care. Observers say many have no other options, as hospitals are often far away, expensive, or poorly staffed, and the consequences can be deadly. Now, a new article published in the journal The Lancet Diabetes and Endocrinology says diabetes now affects 21 million African men and women, a number that authors say is expected to climb to 35 million in the next 20 years. They estimate the prevalence of undiagnosed diabetes is 62% in middle-aged adults. Those younger than age 60 make up 3/4 of deaths related to the condition. Experts say the problem is tied to the social and lifestyle transitions now taking place in Africa, such as migration into urban areas without adequate green space and options for exercise. They point out that medical infrastructure and technologies in sub-Saharan Africa are heavily geared toward responding to communicable diseases such as HIV, TB, and malaria. The challenge is to make hospitals, clinics, and health personnel more responsive to the treatment of diabetes. A Tanzanian chemical engineer has designed an innovative water filter using nanotechnology to purify water. Dr. Askwar Hilonga says his filter can remove up to 99.99% of bacteria, microorganisms, and contaminants.
This is clean, safe drinking water.
Tanzanian scientist Dr. Askwar Hilonga says the water filter he has created is very effective. The new invention is now helping a section of Tanzanians get clean water. Catherine Nyanyaro is a housewife and lives in Arusha. She says the filter is also helping her save time.
Before I had this filter, I used to fetch water from the river, and sometimes I used it without boiling it because it is very time-consuming to boil the water. I had many problems, like typhoid and other diseases from the water.
The filter is tailored to absorb anything from copper and fluoride to bacteria and viruses. Gravity pulls the water down through a series of buckets connected by tubes. The buckets contain sand with a layer of good bacteria on top, which eat the microbes that contain diseases like typhoid. The magnetic quality of the sand kills other bacteria as the water filters through it. The final bucket uses nanomaterials to filter out any remaining microbes. Dr. Hilonga was inspired by a visit to his parents' village outside Arusha in Tanzania, where many people with no access to clean water suffer from waterborne diseases.
In Tanzania, 70% of households, of 9 million households, are not using any kind of a filter. That is how big the market is. That is in Tanzania alone. 9 million households. Then imagine in Kenya, Uganda, Ethiopia, Sub-Saharan Africa, India, and elsewhere. So the market is very big.
One filter costs about $140 and can supply many liters of clean water a day. The Blue Sky Primary School in Arusha uses it to quench the thirst of more than 70 children.
Well, we analyzed the water around, and we have a river like 50 meters far from here, and we saw that it was not healthy, that water. Then we took water from the government supply, but we also saw that it was not going to be healthy, and we want the best things for our kids, so we decided to buy the filter.
Dr. Hilonga hopes the filter will one day be used to help communities and villages across Africa access clean water. That's our Africa Health Report for today. Back to you, Vincent.
Well, thank you very much for joining us today, Lino. Be sure to watch for Lino Mudu every Tuesday and Thursday for the latest health news in Africa, right here on Africa 54. Well, it's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54. A viral documentary raises tough questions about post-apartheid South Africa. We'll be right back.
I am Sheikh Sali, host and senior editor of VOA's international call-in talk show, Straight Talk Africa.
Today we'll examine the tobacco industry.
We pretty much touch on anything that you can think of. Politics, health issues, human rights issues, you name it, we talk about it. The issues that we discuss are pertinent to most people on the African continent. A very, very rare and unique opportunity to interact with their leaders.
And welcome back to Africa 54. Here's what's trending. A controversial documentary sparks debate on race in South Africa. The film Luister, or Listen in Afrikaans, alleges racial discrimination at the elite Stellenbosch University. Released on YouTube, the documentary has gone viral, causing controversy across the country. It has triggered a debate on race relations and on the state of education in South Africa. Issues raised include the use of Afrikaans as a language of instruction at the university, and black students' claims that they face prejudice and accuse the university of racism. Universities have become hotbeds for student activism in post-apartheid South Africa. Next up, a robo-thespian takes to the stage.
I'm singing in the rain, just singing in the rain.
It may not be Gene Kelly, but this lyrical robot can certainly belt out a tune. Created by engineers in Cornwall, the robo-thespian robots have sung and danced their way into museums, visitor attractions, and even plays. The androids are programmed to have a personality and can interact and respond to humans. Robo-thespian got its big break when it starred on the stage as a protagonist in a play at this year's Edinburgh Festival. The drama examined the theme of people in an aging society being cared for by robots. And finally, the wearable technology market has some fresh competition. According to analysts, the smartwatch market is small when compared to the smartphone market, but it is growing steadily. The highly anticipated Samsung S2 has a circular frame that can be rotated to scroll through notifications and apps, so your fingers won't tire out from endless swiping. It is a design feature which separates it from Apple's smartwatch. Electronics giant LG is releasing the deluxe version of its smartwatch. The company will only produce 500 of the 23-karat gold-plated watches, a tactic to appeal to niche markets. And that's what's trending today. Vincent?
Well, thanks a lot, and that's our show for today. Have a good night. Thanks for watching.
Welcome to English in a Minute, where we teach you all about idioms in American English. If people tell you that you need to make up your mind, what do you think they mean? Let's listen.
I'd like to go to France to see the Eiffel Tower, or Italy for the awesome food, or maybe Spain for the amazing beaches.
Okay, make up your mind. Make up your mind.
Make up your mind is a way of saying make a decision or pick something. It might mean making a choice from two or more things. Some people have trouble making a decision, so others might tell them, make up your mind and pick one.
Make up your mind.
And that's English in a Minute.